In this video, we're going to do a few practice questions that relate to law of sines and law of cosines, just to reinforce the points that we made in the video regarding those laws. This page of practice questions will be linked to in the comments. You should, if you do have a printer readily available, and can print that page out as quickly as possible so that you can follow along as easily as possible. That would be great. If not, you can write this work on a separate sheet of paper, but again, it would be beneficial to have this all printed out. I will also suggest that, especially for those of you who are already slightly familiar with law of sines and cosines, or feel good about what you learned in the law of sines and cosines video, the lesson, you may want to attempt to do all four of these questions on your own prior to watching me work through them, or at least work through one or two of them, see if you get them, if you understand them, if you feel confident, and then continue to work through them. It's really up to you. If you want to just watch me work through them and follow along with me, that's fine, but I would encourage you to at least attempt them on your own prior to watching me work through them. So we'll start with number 35, of course. We've got a cargo ship. That cargo ship is 4.2 miles from a lighthouse. So I'm going to slash my phrases here. And a fishing boat, the boat that is 5 miles from the lighthouse as shown below. Let's take a look below. So cargo ship, 4.2 miles from the lighthouse. Fishing boat, 5 miles from the lighthouse. Okay, we can see that. They say the angle between the straight lines from the lighthouse to the two vessels is 5 degrees. So from the lighthouse, two lines, one going up there to the cargo ship, one going down there to the fishing boat. They tell us that that angle in there is 5 degrees, very small angle. The approximate distance in miles from the cargo ship to the fishing boat is given by which of the following expressions? Let's go ahead and circle what they are asking. Distance, it is an approximate distance they're asking for from the cargo ship, from cargo ship to fishing boat. From cargo ship to fishing boat. So it is this distance right here that they are looking for. Let me make that look more like a question mark. So that very small distance, or what seems like the smallest distance from the cargo ship to the fishing boat. As I mentioned in the video on law of sines and law of cosines, often, not always, but often, the law will be given to you, and indeed in this question the law of cosines is given to us, which means we know we have to use the law of cosines. However, even if that law had not been given, we should be able to tell by the fact that we're not dealing with a right triangle here, so we can't use SOHCAHTOA, trigonometry, and in the answer choices we have answer choices that are structured like the law of cosines. We see the length of one side squared, the length of another side squared, we see that too, we see the length of one side, length of another side, and then the cosine of an angle. All of these answers, well, at least B through E, look like they are structured like the law of cosines. So even if the law of cosines hadn't been given in this question, we would know that the question is testing law of cosines. So what do? We need this side here. We need, I'm going to call that side, let's call it, why don't we label these? We'll label this L, C, and F. This point will be F, this point will be C, this point will be L. So what do we need? We need CF, the length of CF. So remember what the law of cosine says. It says if we take the length of that side, CF squared, we know that that will be equal, that side, the length of that side squared will be equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. So that's 4.2 squared plus 5.0 squared. We can already kind of see where the first parts of these answer choices were coming from. Then remember we have to subtract out a 2. We have to multiply that 2 by the lengths of those two other known sides, 4.2 and 5. And again, we shouldn't let our eyes be darting back and forth between our work and the answer choices, but we should note that we can sort of see shaping up that either B or D will be our answers, because B and D have all of the elements that we've just written down here. Now here's where we have to add, or I should say multiply, the cosine of the angle that is opposite the side that we need, the side that's on the left-hand side of this equation. That angle is this tiny little angle here, which remember in the question they told us was 5 degrees. So now we have the law of cosines written out. If we want to actually isolate just CF, in other words, we want to get rid of that squared, what do? We square root both sides of the equation, and we get that CF equals all of this stuff up here. Now we got to be careful when we go to the answer choices to make sure that we pick something that looks exactly like what we just wrote here, and indeed that would be answer choice B. Answer choice C and E we can get rid of because they have pluses, not minuses. That's at least the easy way to get rid of those two. Answer choice D doesn't have the right angle over here that we're taking the cosine of. We're not taking the cosine of an 85-degree angle, but a 5-degree angle. And then answer choice A actually looks like it's simply a Pythagorean theorem type answer. So the answer there is B. That is what they were asking for the distance from the cargo ship to the fishing boat, and indeed that's what we found, the length of CF. Moving on to number 40 for triangle ABC shown below. There's ABC. The length of BC is 50. They've labeled that for us. Which of the following equations, when solved, will give us the length of AB? So they've marked AB with the question mark. That's the side that we need to find an equation that will allow us to solve for that side. So clearly, what are we using here? The law of sines. They give us the law of sines. We can see the answer choices are structured like the law of sines. So clearly, we're going to be using the law of sines here. So what do we need? We need that unknown side. So what we have to do is we'll first write the ratio that involves that unknown side, and that ratio would be the sine of 68 degrees, which is the angle that is opposite the unknown side, and then we'll put, let's use AB since that's what the side is, A to B, and that's what's in the answer choices, ABs, ABs, ABs. And remember that we can set that equal to the ratio of the sine of another angle in the triangle over the length of the side opposite that angle, the 58. So over 50. Now, of course, if we did know side AC, we could also use a ratio involving angle B, the 54 degrees, and side AC, but we don't know side AC, so we are forced to use the side that we know and the angle that is opposite that side, the 58 degrees. So it looks like this equation, when solved, if we were to cross multiply and isolate AB, we would get what we need. So now we're going to be very careful in going to the answers. Let's, all the ABs are on the right-hand side of these equal signs. So let's just eliminate any answer that doesn't have sine of 68 over the AB. This one does not, this one does, this one does not, this one does, this one does not. So clearly F, H, and K are out. And in terms of the other side of our equation, we have sine of 58 over 50. There's sine of 58 over 50. That's sine of 54 over 50. Answer choice J does not work. Answer choice G does. Is that what they were asking? Which of the following equations, when solved, will give the length of AB? Yes, that's what we set up, and we have gotten the correct answer here. In number 48, let's go ahead and work through this one. We can already see that this is going to be law of sines, but let's read through this. A surveyor is finding the dimensions of the triangular lot shown below. The length of one side is 80 feet. Let's start slashing these guys. We have the 80 feet right here. Which of the following is an expression for the length of the side, opposite 110? They have marked that side for us with a question mark, so we know what side we're looking for. It's this long side opposite the 110 degrees. So, law of sines, as we did in the last question, we're going to go ahead and set up the law of sines. The law of sines says that the sine of an angle, I'm using the 24 here because we know the length of the side opposite the 24, and that length goes in the denominator of that ratio. So the ratio of the sine of this angle over the length of the side opposite that angle, that ratio must equal the sine of this angle, the 110 degree angle, over the length of the side opposite that ratio. So when we cross, if we're solving for x, which is again the length of the side opposite that, I believe I just said opposite that ratio. That's not correct. Opposite that angle, my fault. Speaking too fast. So what do we do now to isolate x? We cross multiply. We get x sine 24 equals 80 sine 110. To further isolate the x, we divide by sine of 24, divide by sine of 24, we get x equals. Now, we could go ahead and find a numeric value for all of this, but there's no reason to do that because we can see in the answer choices that the answer choices are structured in this expression. They're structured according to this expression. So we are just looking for 80 sine 110 over sine of 24. 80 sine 110, this one doesn't have the 110. Answer choice G does not have the 80. Answer choice H does not have the sine 110 in the numerator. In answer choice J, we do have everything we need in the numerator, 80 times sine 110, and then over sine of 24. It looks like J is good, and then of course answer choice K is missing the 80 in the numerator, which means we are done. The answer is J. Now, in the video, I did mention that if you have a program that will solve triangles for you, we have the TriSolve program here. In this case, we could have used TriSolve because we have angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side is number 5 there. I'm going to hit number 5. Angle 1, angle 1. So we'll call angle 1 the 24-degree angle, angle 2. And again, I do like to label these so that I know what I'm entering in the calculator and in which order. Angle 2 will be the 110, and then side, I don't need to label that because there's only one side. So notice the program has given me the third angle, which is 46 degrees. It has given me the side opposite angle 2. Well, angle 2 was the 110-degree angle. The side opposite that angle is 184, according to my program, 184 and some change. So let's say 184.8. What we could then do by getting that 184.8, and again, we're assuming that we didn't do any of this work, but we could go through these answers and we could find out which answer equals 84.8. And indeed, if you go to answer choice J, you will get, so let's do alpha F1, enter, let's do 80 sine 110 over sine of 24. And let's make sure we're in degree mode. Yes, we're in degree mode. Always should make sure we're in degree mode before we start doing trig functions with degrees, and we hit enter and we get 184.82, which is exactly what the TriSolve program had given us. Now, even if you had gone this route first and gotten this expression as your answer, you could always use the program to check your answer to make sure that indeed 80 sine 110 over sine 24 does equal 184.8 as produced by the program. So, oops, that decimal's not supposed to go there. 184.8. So that is number 48, and then finally we have number 49 at the bottom. In this question, clearly you can see that we're going to be using the law of cosines, as the law of cosines is given again, as it often is. So let's go ahead and read through this. The triangle shown below has side lengths 37, 38, 39 inches. Which of the following expressions gives the measure largest angle of the triangle? Measure the largest angle of the triangle. You do obviously need to know in this case that the largest angle of a triangle will be opposite the largest side of that triangle. The largest angle and the largest side are sort of linked to each other. So the largest side is the 39, which means the largest angle will be this angle down here. What we are going to do, and actually we could make this possibly even easier for ourselves by labeling this C, and maybe we'll label these A and B. I don't know if the A and B are going to come out exactly right in the answer choices, but at least labeling this vertex down here as angle C will allow us to match up what's going on in this triangle with the form of the law of cosines that they gave us in the question. So they wanted the measure of the largest angle, which means we are looking for the measure of that angle C. Let's go ahead and start working this one out. Let me zoom out here a little bit. So what we're going to do is we are going to do the length of side C. Remember that if this vertex is C, that means this side would be little c. That's what goes, the length of that side goes right here in for C. So we are going to square 39. And then remember, always over here we have the sum of the products, the sum of the squares of the other two sides. So I'm going to do 38 squared plus 37 squared. Then we always have, and again, we can use what's going on here. A squared plus b squared is the, as I just said, the sum of the squares of the other two sides. Then we have to subtract out 2 times the lengths of the other two sides, not squared in this case. So that's 2 times 38 times 37. Again, it's just the other two sides. And then we have the cosine of angle C, which is what we don't know. So we're just going to write a C there. And now to start solving for C, to start isolating C, we've got a bunch of small algebraic steps that we need to do. First things first, let's go ahead and subtract both the 38 squared and the 37 squared from both sides. 38 squared, 37 squared. So now we have 39 squared minus 38 squared minus 37 squared all on the left. On the right, we still have that negative 2 times 38 times 37 cosine C. And again, generally, we're not supposed to be looking back and forth between the answer choices in our work. But if you were in a rush and you needed to glance at the answers to see which one is in the right format, you could kind of tell that certain answers are not going to be right as of this point. Having said that, again, I highly recommend, I highly discourage you from letting your eyes glance back and forth, because you are bound to make some sort of a careless mistake, especially one in which you may pick what is a partial answer but not a final answer. So now that we have all of this, we're going to divide both sides by negative 2, 38, 37, negative 2, 38, 37. That is just to isolate the cosine of C. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to write 39 squared minus 38 squared minus 37 squared all over negative 2 times 38 times 37. On the right hand side, we still have our cosine of C. And for those of you who are familiar with inverse trig functions, you will know that in order to isolate this C, in order to get this C out of the cosine function, in other words, we will have to inverse cosine both sides of this equation. And by doing that, we free the angle C from the cosine function. And on the left, we just have cosine inverse 39, blah, 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 blah. We have all of this stuff that's in parentheses up here. So really, this guy right here is going to be the measure of angle C, the inverse cosine of all this mess. And if we go to the answer choices now, we definitely can see that C, D, and E, which were the answers I was referring to when I said we could glance at the answers and see some of them that clearly are not right. So these three answers are clearly not correct because they lack the denominator. And then probably the easiest thing to do here would be just to look in the denominator and see that we need a 2, a 38, a 37, a 2, a 38, a 37. Answer choice A has the 2 and the 38, but it contains the 39. The 39 is not part of our denominator, which means the answer must be B. Again, we could use a calculator program, a triangle solver, to confirm that answer or even to get that answer outright, but you should know that if you use the calculator initially, if you use the calculator program initially, what you will do is you will get a value for this angle. Let's say you got something like 62 degrees from the calculator program. You would then need to know how to convert these answer choices to values so that you could see which answer equals 62 degrees. And doing so, you can do it. You just have to be very careful about how you enter all of this stuff in the calculator, as there are many opportunities for careless mistakes. So there is some practice on the law of sines and the law of cosine to get a good sense of some of the variations that these questions can take, where, in number 35, you're just finding the length of a side. Number 40, you have to set up an equation, find out which equation would allow us to solve for the length of a side. In number 48, again, we solved for the length of a side, and our answer was just the sine expression, not an actual number. And then, of course, in number 49, we were solving for an angle, and were required in that case to use inverse trig functions. That is all for this practice.